All right, so then the last thing to kind of look at, as we had said, know everything Byzantine Empire, know everything kind of relationship between, as this case, East and West goes. The other really significant thing then, and this one, probably big enough even to kind of go up on here, as we said, it's the 4 M's plus the Byzantine Empire, plus probably one other very significant thing, and that's going to be the Crusades. So let's put that down for Europe here as well, the Crusades. Now this is going to be one that is going to be absolutely huge, all right? We throw exclamation points all around it. You will get questions on the Crusades. Now let's predict what type of question you're probably going to get.
How it affected trade.
How it affected trade. Are they going to ask you, for instance, so yeah, let's look at the first part. They're going to ask you questions about, you know, particular battles of the Crusades, that sort of thing? They're not. Well, we should probably know a little bit of a basic notion behind this. Crusades really an attempt by European Christians to do what? Take over what? To take over the Holy Land, right? It's the Holy Lands of Jerusalem and very important Christian sites, because what had happened to the Holy Land and those important Christian sites at this point? It's all Islamic, right? All of those sites are basically covered by and involving Islam. So, what we've got with the Crusades, an attempt by Christians to take over the Holy Land. It doesn't work all that well. Christians win some battles, Muslims win some battles, right, for a period of time. But what is our ultimate significance of all of this then? Christians and Muslims for the very first time start to do what?
Trade.
Trade and make connections. Okay? So the really, really important thing is trade and connections between East and West. Okay? Between East and West. Now, let's back it up maybe just another quick second here. Guys, how would we kind of characterize during this entire time frame? During this entire time frame, how do we want to say this? You know, if you're talking about one side of the world being up and another side of the world being down, who is definitely up and who is definitely down in 600 to 1450? Who's doing really well for themselves? Muslims in the Eastern world, right? Think about the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean was thriving. Muslims were thriving. China, we haven't got to China yet. We'll do that in just a little bit. China was thriving. So we have all of these new technologies. We have all of these new, we'll get to this in just a moment, like I said, but we have things like sailing technologies, like the compass. We have paper-making technology. We have new technologies when it comes to math and science and astronomy. And all of those technologies, invented by Europeans, all of those things are coming from the Eastern world, right? They're coming from the Islamic and Far Eastern worlds. What's significant about this, for the very first time, the Crusades opens up Europeans to all of those things and all those tools and technologies that they'd kind of forgotten for a period of time, or actually were never exposed to for a long period of time. Does anybody know the last final thing? Besides tools and technology, okay? So connections, East and West, and what we also want to say is technologies from the East. Do you guys remember the last thing that Europeans were opened up to? And it actually involves some stuff that was originally European. Philosophers, right? Particularly the philosophies of who? Who are like our famous old philosophies? Like the Aristotles, the Socrates, the Platos. Those guys are all philosophers from where?
Greek.
Those are all Greek philosophers. How come Europeans really weren't studying Greek philosophers, though, during like the 6, 7, 8, 900s?
They crashed.
Well, because think about it, where was the number one, do you guys remember where the number one library in the world was that kept a lot of these? Alexandria. And Alexandria, North Africa. Who's running Alexandria in the 7, 800s? Muslims are. So Europeans are totally left out in the dark for about the next 500 years on any of these aspects, basically, of not only technologies, but also aspects of learning from earlier on. So the important thing to understand here with the Crusades is not only opened up with all of these new Eastern trade items and technologies and things like that, but the other things that Europeans get is they get philosophy. They get philosophy back from the Greeks, or they basically relearn Greek philosophy. Okay? Now, to kind of put the finishing touches on Europe then. Europeans are opened up to the rest of the world. As we said, the Crusades themselves, the battles really don't matter all that much. Christians won some, Muslims won some. Ultimately, Christians don't retake the Holy Land. But the important thing to understand is they get all of these technologies, they get all of these trade goods, they open themselves up from the rest of the world, they get Greek philosophy once again, and that convinces Europeans that once we're now into about the 1300s or so, that it's time to have a what? This cultural growth, this cultural rebirth called a what? Renaissance. So the last thing we're going to put on here is that all of this directly leads into what's called the Renaissance. And the Renaissance in Europe, exactly, cultural, social rebirth, where we're going to be kind of like reacclimated to aspects of classical culture and classical learning. All right, and we're also going to be opened up, obviously, to the wonders, basically, of the Eastern world when it comes to trade goods, when it comes to technologies, when it comes to everything else from the rest of the world. Now, the stuff we have not really talked about yet, and we will in just a little bit, is we have to talk about what's going on in China at this time. I know I'm having you put Ming Dynasty on there, but we're actually going to talk about a couple other dynasties that were in place before the Ming Dynasty that were really kind of the big guys. Do you guys know, actually, by the way, who the people that were there right before the Ming? Think about the guys that have some major inventions, like the gunpowder guys.
Shang.
That's the Tang. So this is going to be the Song and the Tang dynasties.
What happened to Zia?
Well, so that's the first one. Xia, Shang, Su. So we're past those guys already. And now in our second unit, we're going to go into the Sui, Tang, Song. And these guys, we'll talk about these in just a little bit, are the guys that have all of these innovations and all of these technologies that finally Europeans are going to get, basically coming out of the Crusades. Okay, very last thing, folks, is everybody starting to see, and hopefully this is what you're kind of getting out of all of this, and I don't think you probably got this when we learned about this, whatever, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Are you starting to kind of see the connections of everything kind of like building together? And one region kind of dependent on another region, and it's all kind of like part of a bigger story, it's kind of a bigger game here. When you get to the end of the finish line like this, if you're starting to kind of see like the whole opening up, and the whole like, oh, I can kind of see the picture for what it is and not necessarily just the individual stuff. When you're looking at it individually, sometimes it's very confusing because there's so much stuff, there's so many little details. Now what I want you to study, when you are studying here, is I want you to take a step back and kind of broaden your look at everything and kind of just look at what are the major world trends, the major world concepts that are happening across the board here. Okay, and that's hopefully what some of these things sort of do for us. So why don't we take a quick little break. When we come back, we'll talk China. We'll talk about wrapping the whole thing up and kind of putting it together, and then we'll kind of get into the finishing touches of how this leads into the next unit. Okay? So, why don't we do, I don't know, 5, 8 minutes, somewhere in there. Does that sound about right? When we're all back, ready to go. Alright, for the final stretch. If you need to go, use the restrooms down the hall to the left. So I opened up that room. And get yourself going. Alright? Yeah.
Johnny, what's the bathroom? How do you breathe? Sure.
No, I usually can't.